The 2024-25 NHL season has come to a close, and not just for the New Jersey Devils, for the entire league. The Florida Panthers back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, the Edmonton Oilers back-to-back Stanley Cup finalists. For Daniel Rebane, I'm James Burley. This is the first Puck on the Parkway episode of the 2025 offseason, which really means in some ways the season has only just begun. And I know, Dan, this is when you get the most excited to talk some hockey, is when some of the names start moving and some of the numbers come out flying. So first and foremost, it's summer in New Jersey, New York. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, summer is here. It is getting hot and it's gonna be hot for the next week. It was nasty out like 2 days ago. It was disgusting humidity, 90 degrees. It's just you didn't want to be outside, but right now it's in the cool 80 range, so I'm having fun. Club World Cup is here in the US, so I've been doing that a little bit. Seen 2 games already at MetLife, got 2 more before the knockout stage begins. But as you said, man, Stanley Cup's over. We'll get to talking about that, but this is when the hockey season begins. So let's get into this, man. It's gonna be a fun summer for Devils fans, hopefully.
I think once the wheels started to come off the wagon of the Devils season in around late December, early January, I think everybody who was a Devils fan was kind of waiting for the offseason, because everybody kind of got the impression at that point this wasn't going to be their year, and it was going to be about who they could add to this consistently improving core of young forwards and defensemen that really have proven that they are an elite team in the NHL. But it's about becoming from a good team to a great team to a contender, because that's the level they need to jump. So this offseason has been long anticipated as one of the biggest one in recent memories for the Devils. They made big splashes last offseason and the summer before. So there's a reason to believe that this summer could be even bigger, and they've already gotten started with some movements. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Stanley Cup briefly. Some former New Jersey Devils did get to hoist the trophy
Yeah.
after defeating the Oilers, but I think just in general, what this showed is like there's a level that you need to reach,
Oh.
and there is some roster construction. I want to say blueprints that the Panthers have been able to champion over these last not just 2 seasons, 3 seasons really, where they've been in the Stanley Cup Finals, 2 of which they won. And Edmonton and several other teams, I think, maybe can point to that as a problem that they might have. The Devils are in that category as well, of course, not even reaching the second round this past season. But for the Edmonton Oilers, it was close. Our old friend Adam Henrique was a win away from a Stanley Cup last year, was 2 wins away this year. I was pulling for him and the Oilers. We didn't need to see the Panthers win again, but I think it was a very good reminder as to what those guys can do, and just how devastating they are on both sides of the puck. So, yeah, they made it look pretty easy in games 5 and 6, didn't they?
Oh man, and you said it perfectly. I think they showed you the blueprint, man. And when we talk about depth, like on the Devils, like the Devils were desperately needing depth this year. I mean, you look at some of those names on the Panthers, fourth line, you're like, oh, okay. AJ Greer, we all know about AJ
Mhm.
Greer. Thomas Nosek, we know about Thomas Nosek. Thomas Nosek wasn't the best player when he was with New Jersey, but when you know your role, you find a groove in a team, and it's not like he scored goals or anything, but he just provided that, you know, what they needed from him. They didn't need him to score. They just needed him to kill penalties, be a nuisance on that fourth line with Gadjevich and Greer in those final 2 series. And man, I when you look at their third line, I think that kind of depicted, why the Panthers won the Stanley Cup. Um, and they have a great top six, but when you have a third line of, Lundell, Lusterinen, and Brad Marchand, that was their best line all playoffs. Like, and it showed. Brad Marchand probably almost snuck away with the Conn Smythe. I was really thinking about giving it to him. If I had a vote, I might have voted for him just because of what he did in the finals. Obviously, Sam Reinhart had a total, playoff performance, and so did Marchand. But to score 6 goals in the finals, I mean, at his age, what he did for this team, I think he was the MVP. if you're totally thinking about it. But yeah, the Devils just didn't have that type of a third line this year. Like when you have a guy like Anton Lundell, who's a baby Barkov, and then you're just able to add a guy like Brad Marchand with his pedigree. I mean, I think they were close to plus 20. Like the whole line was close in that range of plus minus. It just showed that when they were on the ice, they made a huge difference to that team, and that's what the Devils need to strive for. We all know that our top six, is probably, once they fill it out, it's a top 10, top six. Like I like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier down the middle. You have Jesper Bratt, Timo Meyer on the wing. Like those are great players in the NHL, but it's that third line. If you can find a good mix of third line players that play, I don't know, like they don't have to put up necessarily the points that the top six does, but they need to have an impact on the ice that kind of gives those players, time off. Like we don't need to see Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier play 25 minutes a night. That was the problem with Edmonton, as we saw. Like they were just relying on Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid just way too much, and they were shut down. So that's what we mean by depth. Like that third line, just that's the reason Florida won the Stanley Cup Finals was that third line, and I'll stick to that. So it was a great series, 1 through 4. I still think Florida dominated that series 1 through 4. It's just that Edmonton had those sequences in games where they showed they were the better team in certain periods. But overall, Florida just dominated that series. It was a completely different series from last year, when they went up 3-0 and Edmonton made their way back to 4-7. But and again, goaltending was a major difference. So I think the Devils having a Jacob Markstrom heading into next year could be a big factor for them if they are to make a long run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned when the top six is full because there's still a couple, probably two big missing pieces
Yeah.
to fill out the top six. Maybe you can work something out where you get another year like you did at a Stefan Nason, and you can play him on the first line. It's just doesn't feel like that's going to happen, or at least it's not likely that he has another career year in terms of goals and points on the power play. But I think the drop off between the top six to bottom six was it was stark this year in a way that it definitely wasn't even just 2 years ago. That Devils team felt a lot more put together than the one that nearly went on a run this past season. So I think that's a good point of addressing, and it's something that the Florida Panthers were able to get over just about every team. I mean, the Oilers made it look like they were the team to beat. I mean,
Oh, they made it look easy out in the West.
the Western Conference, for as stacked as it is at the top, the Oilers really separated themselves from the pack in a way that, while I did have them going to the Stanley Cup, they were my champion when the playoffs started, actually. I did not think they would make it look that easy. I thought part of the problem that they might have, should they get to the Stanley Cup final, is that they might be banged up. But that was the opposite. The Panthers had a little bit more of a tough go of it, except, of course, when they played the Carolina Hurricanes, because, they just always happened to be a breeze for the Panthers. But who are we to make fun of the Hurricanes? Let's be real.
Yeah.
That being said, let's talk about the Devils. Let's hone in on some of those roster issues and what they're going to need to address in the upcoming season. And honestly, even with the trades that have already gone down, and we'll get into those, there's not a whole lot of money to work with for Tom Fitzgerald here. For the adjustments that the Devils should be trying to make. I mean, you've got this core, you got them all to team-friendly contracts for a number of years. These are the years you can't waste. So they have to go for it, and they got to go for it soon, which could mean names as big as Dougie Hamilton are no longer with the New Jersey Devils. We saw some of the more unfavorable contracts in Erik Haula. That one's off the books. Andre Palat is probably next on that list. And then you could make the case that a Dawson Mercer may also, that's a name that might have to be floated out as well. So let's start with the Erik Haula trade. This one just coming in a couple days ago, traded to the Nashville Predators on Wednesday for defenseman Jeremy Hounsell and a 4th-round pick in the 2025 NHL draft. I mean, this is a slam dunk from Fitzgerald. This is an Erik Haula who played one season with the Predators already, will be going back to Nashville. I'm not entirely sure what the Predators are doing. I mean this with all due respect. Erik Haula was a massive part of that playoff team a couple years ago. Scored big goals in that round one win against the Rangers in 3 different games, I believe he scored goals. So, I mean, this is a guy who Devils fans should have nothing bad to say about moving forward. This is a delight to be around in the locker room, and just unfortunately, 3.15, I believe,
Yep.
million AAV just wasn't realistic for a third line caliber player, fourth line caliber player at this point. Just the points steadily went down in the last couple seasons, and unfortunately, it just didn't seem like it would be a good idea for him to move forward with the Devils. And they get that contract off the books; they're not retaining any of it. And then they get a young defenseman who has something of a chance, a fighting chance to be at the NHL level. Will probably be in the AHL. For the start of the season, and then they get a 4th-round pick out of it. This is a great trade to start off the offseason, and they might need a couple more like it, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to get a top 100 pick for Erik Haula, which most people thought would be a cap dump, or they might even have to attach something to get rid of him. Um, that was easy enough for me. I could have just walked away with just the pick. Um, so we'll see about Hansel. He'll probably be in the AHL for a couple of years. He might not even make it to the NHL, but there's something there. They made it. His Seattle team in 2023 made it to the Memorial Cup final. They lost, but that season he had a plus 70 rating. I mean, he was one of their better players on that team. Um, and this was his first full year. Obviously, he struggled a bit where he had to go to the ECHL. Played good down there. So he'll have to try to make that jump to the AHL full time next year. But I like the trade. Get 3.15 million off the books. We kind of penciled that in as a trade that needed to happen. And there's more to do, like you said. The Devils need to open up some more cap space. We'll talk about that. Palat 6 million. Dawson Mercer's 4 million might need to move in a bigger trade to maybe acquire a better top six player. And you might have to use him in that trade to kind of upgrade there. But it's a good start, and we're just starting. We're just starting. This is just the beginning.
Well, speaking of other moves, not a trade, but Juho Lamikko was signed earlier this week.
Out of the blue.
Yeah, that was one that just jumped up on the radar last weekend. Actually, 1 year, $800,000 contract, and you know, I think this is a guy who has the ability to be either a depth forward or someone who slots in on that fourth line. Dan, you feel like he's going to have sort of that Justin Dowling role that we saw this year?
Yeah, I think when you look at his last season in the NHL, 21-22, over 50% faceoff man. I think he's just going to be that depth centered for this team. And if injuries happen, he could slot in at fourth line center. He's a big body, can skate really good. And obviously it's a European league. It's not one of the better European leagues, but it's up there in Switzerland. But yeah, he was a very productive player out there. He scored, I think his first season, he scored 27 goals or whatever it was. So, you know, his shot is there. Maybe it can translate where he scores like 10 goals this year if he's that fourth line center all season. But yeah, just a good depth move that nobody really expected because he was playing over in Europe. I was kind of wondering if Fitzgerald would pull one of these deals off because I saw a bunch of these happening earlier in the offseason where like Edmonton was signing 2 guys from Europe, Tampa Bay. It's like all these good teams are signing these European players to like league minimum contracts. And I was like, maybe the Devils find like one guy that they're kind of interested in and bring him over just as depth next year. So I'm interested to see him back in the NHL, but there's promising signs that he could be a productive depth player for this team.
Yeah, I think the profile, because this is a player I didn't really know much about. I think the profile fits what the Devils need to have in their bottom six, particularly in the fourth line. And the face-off statistics is something that I like. The size and speed, that's something that they can work with. And of course, the contract is favorable.
Yep.
And that's a big part of what they're trying to put together right now is finding those sorts of contracts. So coming out of the Swiss league for the past 3 seasons is not the highest of the high in Europe, probably around the third or fourth best league in Europe, perhaps. So
Yeah.
this is something that's a bit of a risk here, but at $800,000, this is a risk
If
that's
anything, you just put him on waivers. So
yeah, and this is a move that I would make if I'm the New Jersey Devils. I mean, obviously there's other players that are going to be in and around that category coming in from Europe. I mean, Lenny Hamanaho is probably going to make the way to North America, probably in the AHL. Arseny Gritsuk is a player whose role we're going to have to find out, and I know we're going to talk about more trade targets, but honing in on who we have in the roster right now, Gritsuk, you imagine will probably fit in the middle six between the third or second line.
mm-hmm.
So that leaves another big spot in the top six, perhaps two big spots in the top six, probably another depth forward as well. In addition to Lemico coming in, there's 3 or 4 players you got to find space for in the forward core. Backup goaltender Jake Allen is there are talks between the Devils and Jake Allen, but it's going to be a matter of, do they have the money to pay for a goaltender?
I don't think that
For as good as
works
Jake
out.
Allen was this year, I don't know if that's going to
He
work
might
out.
go out there. He might go out there and get like $4 million from Edmonton because he's an upgrade over Stuart Skinner.
Yeah, I think he has a case to be made as an NHL starter for a lot of different teams at this point, for how good he was last season and at the tail end of 2024 as well.
Yeah.
So hats off to what Jake Allen was able to do for the Devils this season, but it looks like it's probably time to move on to Nico Dawes. And then on the blue line, I mean, they still have extra blue liners here. Like, they are currently contracted at the NHL level. You've got 7 guys who are good enough to be playing week in, week out. So it's a really good chance we see one of those guys move on. With that said, let's talk about Arseny Gritsuk before we move into some of these trade targets, Dan. What specifically do you think we can expect from him? I know we want to say that middle six. We want him to be that scoring touch that they're missing in that role. But as we've seen with many players before, even those who are supremely talented at that level, they can struggle making the adjustment from Russia specifically into the NHL. I mean, I think the most glaring one I can think of in my brain, even though he was successful with the Devils for large parts of his time here, was most recently Nikita Gusev. He was a guy that I thought was going to come in and was going to transform the way the Devils played on the attack. And in some ways, he was successful, and in other ways, it just didn't pan out. So I know they're pretty different players, but this is something that the Devils are going to have to adjust if they want Gritsuk to gel.
Yeah, and the thing about Gusev is he wasn't even a U-25 guy. He was already in the prime of his career. But there's a big difference between those guys is that, Arseny Gritsuk is a much better skater. And I think that's going to help his transition to the NHL. I think that's the big thing with like Russian guys is sometimes their skating isn't the best because of the style of play in the KHL or just how they develop out there. But, Gritsuk has really good skating. His shot is really good. It could be probably the best on the team, like rivaling like Timo Meyer or Dougie Hamilton even. It's just that good. It pinpoints. You could pick a corner with his one-timer. So it's going to be interesting where they kind of slot him in. I think most fans are hoping that he can take a top 6 role at a training camp. I just don't think that's, realistic to put that expectations on him. That's why I feel like if they're able to start him on the third line, maybe with a couple other guys that they bring in via trade that we might talk about, or a free agent signing there. I think him being on the third line, kind of gathering himself, building up his confidence as games go on throughout the NHL, and then if injuries happen, he can slide up if need be. But I feel like if they can start him at that third line, get a role for him. Maybe power play 2. I think he could be real productive and maybe be like a 15 to 20 goal scorer in his rookie year. I think if he can score 20 goals, I think that is a slam dunk of a get for his rookie season. But if he could get 15, I think that would be that's something Tom Fitzgerald is looking at a lot from Gritsuk.
Yeah, I think that would be a success in year 1 at least, and I think that he's a player that we're going to learn about when he gets here. He's a player with a lot of high upside. It doesn't have to be solved right away in season 1, but this is a guy that has very good upside, and not only is he a great skater like you mentioned, but he's a sniper as well.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's something that can translate at the NHL level, even
And
if you're not
he's
a
got
great
some
skater.
physicality too. He's not shy to, get in those corners and throw his body around, even though he might be just under 6 foot. I think he's getting close to 200 pounds now. So he's got some muscle on him. So I'm interested to see how he kind of transitions from that big ice to the smaller ice. I feel like his game could kind of his physicality and that role could kind of help him get more used to the smaller ice. So I'm real interested. I think he can really thrive here.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see, but high expectations, and that's a player that we're all very much looking forward to. Another player that the Devils have begun contract talks with is restricted free agent 25-year-old center Cody Glass. This is a player that came in and had an immediate impact right around the trade deadline, and initially was a little bit disappointing that he was the big name that came in at that deadline. But I mean, and Brian Dumoulin. I can't forget about Dumo, who was
Yeah.
excellent in the playoffs. Um, but Cody Glass came in and kind of played his way into Devils fans' hearts for the moment, and then kind
Fe-
of
Fell
lost
off
his
a
way a
bit.
little bit
Yeah.
there. But I think he was being asked to play in a role that wasn't exactly conducive to his skills. I think we both kind of agree if they can get that contract friendly below two
Below
and a
two.
half,
Yeah, below two.
below two. I think that's a realistic expectation for him to be, a fourth line center, barring injury, a third line center. So I think that this is a good move for the Devils. He's a player that that's the type of guy you have in your bottom six in a good team. Um, but again, I still think that begs the question. They need to bring in someone for that third line, in addition to Gritsyuk, in addition to Lamico, in addition to Cody Glass. But it's good to see that those talks have begun.
Yeah, we'll get probably into some names when we get the trade targets. But you brought it up. I think um, if Cody Glass kind of thinks to himself, he had some good success when he first got here, but it kind of tailored off towards the end of the season in the playoffs. He also got hurt a bit as well. Shout out to Jacob Markstrom with slashing him by accident. But yeah, I think his game kind of would fit. And if the Devils really want to go far, having him as a fourth line center would be a massive addition to roster construction. And I think it's just going to come down to how much money he wants. I think if you can check real quick what his qualifying offer is on Puckpedia, I don't think he's going to get a qualifying offer because I believe it's 2.5. That's why I think they're having contract extension talks right now. Um, so if I was Tom Fitzgerald, I'd offer him, I'd even offer him just like 1 year at like 1.5, just to be like, here, man, we want you here. Go prove that you can do this for a full season. Like, be a fourth line center, go up to third line when an injury happens, because obviously injuries are going to happen. Go prove that you are that type of player that we could have going forward, and we'll give you maybe a longer extension after a year. Um, I like Cody Glass's game. I just think his style kind of fits what New Jersey wants out of their fourth line center. So that's my only problem with it. I think people think that he could be a 3C for a full season. I just don't think so, especially if your aspirations are Stanley Cup. Like, no offense to Cody Glass, but he's not Anton Lundell.
Yeah,
Obviously that's, you know, apples to oranges, but I mean, they're both first round picks. Like, they were both first round picks in their draft. So I think if they're able to lock him down at that fourth line center, it would just be much better for him as well. The expectations will be much lower, and he can be able to perform much better than what he was going down the end of the season last year.
yeah, totally. I think anything below two, I would snap on that if I'm the Devils. And like you mentioned, his qualifying offer, I have looked that up, is 2.5. So
Yes.
I don't think it goes above that for above two, at least for him, and for the Devils' sake, that would be ideal. As for targets, let's talk about them now, because those are the players that the Devils already either have on the books or about to get on the books. So let's start thinking about it. I know you mentioned the idea of helping Gritsuk out with a Russian potentially, and I kind of like that. I think that there's precedent for that in the league when new players come in, and this Devils team currently doesn't have a player, at least not at the NHL level full time, that would be that kind of stopgap for Gritsuk if that's a place where they need to help him. So start talking me through some names you got on there, and then we can talk about some free agents as well.
Yeah. Well, it's really hard. There's not many Russians in the NHL, and then like some of the good ones that you're like, oh, I could do that, are just like untrade. Like you're not going to be able to trade from, especially like from like Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who's on Columbus, but he was really good this year. And then Dorofeyev in Vegas, like you're not going to be able to get Dorofeyev off of Vegas, especially with his cap hit so low for one more year. But there's two Russians that are definitely gonna be on the market this year, and that's Vladimir Tarasenko and Ivan Barbashev. Um, Tarasenko might not be the sexiest name right now, especially after he got traded to the Rangers. Really didn't perform in that playoffs. But then the next year he goes down to Florida and wins the Stanley Cup. Last year he was with Detroit. Again, didn't have the best numbers, and now he's back on the market. I just think having a guy like a Vladimir Tarasenko, who's had the ups and downs throughout his career in the NHL, like Stanley Cup winner, he's been that goal scorer in St. Louis. I think he could just be that mentor to a guy like Gritsuk, who it's going to be hard for him, if he's just the only Russian in the locker room, the language barrier, just the style of play. So having a guy like Vladimir Tarasenko could kind of help that out. And he's only got 1 year left. So if you trade from him and he doesn't really perform with his offensive numbers, you could just say, all right, you can go to free agency. And then Barbashev as well. He's just another guy. He's had pretty good years out in Vegas since his trade out there. I just it's going to be hard to kind of see if that his style of play kind of would work with the Devils. I kind of know what Vladimir Tarasenko is. I just don't know if Ivan Barbashev's game will translate from what Vegas wants to do to New Jersey. But those are like the two big name Russians that you can find on the trade market, because Vegas is trying to clear cap, and Detroit obviously is trying to just shake everything up. So we'll see what those two end up going. But those are two names that I would definitely keep an eye out for New Jersey.
Barbashev, I mean, he's also not a former Ranger, so I think I like him a little bit more for that reason. But I mean, he's also like he's playing in a first line now. Like
Yeah,
he did for most of his at least 2 of the 3 years he was playing in Vegas. He was predominantly a top sixer, and I mean that's what the Devils need at this moment. Tarasenko obviously had been that for a long time. Currently, that's just currently not who he is at the moment. And he did play for the Rangers, so I don't appreciate that about him either. With that said, I do think that as few names as there are to be traded for, the free agency is not that much more spectacular either.
it's a very weak free agent class.
I mean, I think I've seen people shout that Ehlers would be a good fit for the Devils.
They
He would be
yeah.
a good fit. I mean, but that's going to be an expensive contract.
Yeah.
Kyle Gronlund is sort of in the same boat, and then I mean, the name at the top of the list is Mitch Marner. In terms of the list of most expensive, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. Another name, though, and a bit older, but he's a recent Stanley Cup champion, and he's a guy who I think would fit beautifully, and is Brad Marchand. I don't know what type of deal that would look like. I don't know where the interest is for any of that, but he's a guy I think would absolutely kill it in black and red, playing next to a Nico Hischier or a Jack Hughes. The only problem is we already got a 63, so I don't know what number he would take if they were to put that together. But are there any other free agents or trade targets that you're specifically really adamant about? Because for me, it's there's not so many that I'm like that are jump off the page. Maybe Brock Besser gets in that conversation as well, but I don't really have any names that jump at me. It feels like Tom Fitzgerald's going to make a move, and it's going to surprise me.
Yeah, I think of free agents, maybe Besser is like the best fit because they kind of need a right-handed sniper.
Mm-hmm.
But go back on Marchand, he'd be an excellent fit for what the Devils kind of need is like that gritty scorer, point producer who just you just hate when he's not on your team,
Yep.
but you love him when he's on yours. And I kind of enjoyed, watching him with the Panthers because I was just like, man, what? Like, imagine that with the Devils. But I kind of heard that what he was looking for if he left Florida, because maybe he resigns in Florida. He kind of enjoyed his time down there. With his blizzards pregame. So he was having fun down there. But it was like 4 years, 8 million AAV, and it's like I don't know, man. I don't think I could do that. Especially his last year would be 41. He'd be getting 8 million at 41 years old. So I don't think I could do that. I think when you look at basically how I said weak free agent class. I think this is going to be a big trade-off season for Tom Fitzgerald if he wants to improve this team, unless they go after like a Brock Besser, who I think probably could fit with like a Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt on that first line. But guys I'm looking at are like Alex Tuck. Buffalo's just a shit show up there, to say the least. Like everybody's upset how they're just not improving. The ownership isn't the best. The front office is a joke. So we'll see. Like a guy like Alex Tuck, who's from Buffalo, like it's very interesting because I feel like he's a guy that would want to re-sign up there. But if he's looking at that team and you're like, man, I don't think this is going anywhere. You can basically stay in the Northeast, going to New Jersey. I think he'd be an excellent ad next to a Jack Hughes with his like big frame and goal scoring ability. Like he's put up 35 goals in multiple seasons since he's gotten out to Buffalo. You'd probably want him to throw a bit more of his body around, but I think he's the type of big body scorer that Tom Fitzgerald has been looking for and not been able to acquire recently. And then another guy up in Buffalo is JJ Peterka. I think
Yep.
that name has been floating around a lot, linking with a lot of teams. Um, Offer sheets this, offer sheet that. Is he going to get traded? I think a trade probably fits Buffalo better because, what's an offer sheet? I think you'd get like a first, a second, and a third or whatever it was, for what he probably would sign in like the 8 million range or like high sevens, low eights. So yeah, I think those two guys up in Buffalo would be very interesting names for Devils fans, and especially you add a guy like JJ Peterka, you put him on the second line with like a Timo Meyer and Nico Hischier, and they all three of them could speak German, so that would be very interesting. Add another German speaker on the team. Any other trade names that you think could fit this team on the wing?
Rating names. Ugh, I mean,
Like I said, I said down in Pittsburgh, Raquel.
okay. I mean, I wanted Raquel at the deadline, but
Yeah.
I
Some
don't
people
know.
were saying Brian Russ, but I don't. I think Raquel is just a better fit.
Another name that we talked about before we started the show that I mentioned was another name that we were floating around at the deadline was Ryan Donato, but
Mm.
at 4 by 4 million, again, I think that's too much money for what you're looking for to get out of Ryan Donato. Um, and if we're trying to really take the Florida Panthers blueprint, I don't think that's a move that they would make.
And that's why Chicago signed him. So
Yeah, that's for a team like Chicago that is in you know the other realm of the NHL as the New Jersey Devils are trying to be at the moment. I think it makes sense for them, not so much for us. I the thing about Alex Tuck though is like that connection that he has to Buffalo might be part of the reason why he's played so well there, and he might not have that he's the alternate captain for the Sabres. He might not have that magic elsewhere, but that's a move that I would absolutely be in favor of. I think JJ Paterka probably like resigns in Buffalo because he is an RFA.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think he's out.
And look, I think that's something that the Devils should jump on. I think that's more or less the type of profile you want to get. Younger too. Like that's a good fit.
Um, and then the only other name that I was like a bigger name for that top six I was thinking about is only because like these rumors came out of Colorado that he just hated his time there for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Is Martin Necas.
Right.
We've already been connected with him from prior years, trading for him down in Carolina. He'd be a very good name to put on that first line with Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. Um, don't know why he hated his time in Colorado. Colorado's a nice city, good team. I'd want to resign there. So interesting if those rumors are true. But if he's on the market, I think again he's up there with guys like a JJ Peterka and Alex Tuck. They're in the same tier of you need if they're available, you gotta try to see if you can get one of those guys in.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the level that you want to find a guy at, right? I mean, that's top level scoring right there. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much all we can speculate on in terms of trades right now.
Oh,
There's
and then one more just for third line center because we didn't
I'll
mention
do it.
any centers is obviously the big name is Ross Colton. If
Ross
we
Colton,
if we
Jersey
can
guy.
bring Ross Colton home to be your third line center, you know, good face-off guy, blazing speed. He was dealing with something this year, so he didn't really take many face-offs. Um, throws a ton of hits. Him being that third line center, Jersey boy who grew up a Devils fan, who want he. It sounds every time he talks about the Devils, it just sounds like he wants to be here. So with Colorado needing to shed cap, the Devils could take that 4 million on, and if he's your third line center, man, that would be a good start to the offseason in acquisitions if you're able to get like a guy like Ross Collins.
That would
So
be I think that's probably the number one option for that role.
yeah,
Um, talking about the magic for Alex Tuck playing at home, coming from upstate New York. I mean, like that's even better
yeah.
for the Devils. I will throw out another name though. I was about to move on, and I think you know where I'm going with this now. It's a guy who just I think he's maybe got one more year on his contract with the Edmonton Oilers.
Mm.
Um, I mean, and he's worth probably too much money at 35 years old for 3 million. But Adam Henrique is a guy who would fit in that role for the Devils. I think he would be look, and even if he's not centering that line
He
anymore,
could
I
play
think
wing.
he'd be a
Yeah.
good fit as a left wing on that third line as well. Um, might need Edmonton to hold on to some of the cash if that's possible. I mean, they've already got. I would say maybe sweeten the deal in a potential Dougie Hamilton trade, but they've already got a $9 million defenseman in Darnell
Not,
Nurse. I'm not sure
not they're about to have two when
when
Bouchard
Bouchard
gets 10
signs.
plus.
Yeah,
So
so I don't know. I can dream, but maybe we have to
yes.
wait another year before number 14 comes back to Newark. That'll be the best when that happens, though. You'll see me
Yep.
celebrate.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can move on. The one contract that the Devils are currently ongoing that we haven't discussed yet is perhaps the biggest one they'll have to sign. And talking about Evan Bouchard getting a bag upcoming with the Oilers, and someone whose bag could rival that of Evan Bouchard really is Luke Hughes. And this is a guy that the Devils have put a lot of stock in, and for good reason. He is that good. Um, the numbers for him have been hovering around 7, around 8 in terms of what the discussions are at. Where do you see that deal going, and when do you think we can expect that to come through?
Yeah, I think, that's the biggest, piece of meat that Tom Fitzgerald has to get done like as soon as possible. Obviously Luke Hughes is in the New York area right now at Fanatics Fest, signing, a bunch of stuff, taking photos and all that. So maybe they could get something done this weekend, early next week, but I think you'd be a fool not to try to get him to an 8-year deal or like anything like 6, 7, 8 years. I think you'd be a fool not to try to get something done in that range. Um, I think people have been all over with the money. I think you could potentially get him in just under 8, like his brother. Like if you can sign a contract just like Quinn Hughes's contract, which was 6 years, 7.82, 7.825, I believe it was,
Hmm.
for Vancouver when he signed. I think you do that right now. You know, throw the pen away, just get it signed. But we'll see. I think it could creep into the low mid eights. But I think if you can keep it in between 7.5 and 8.5, if it's anywhere in between that, you do it. So I wouldn't hassle too much on this. I think they need to get this done as soon as possible, so they know how much cap space they're working with. So yeah, that's what I would do. I think Luke needs to be here long term. I would sign 8 years. I would get him an 8 year contract, no doubt in my mind. But let's see what Luke wants. Maybe he wants to, get a 6 year deal or something like that, so he can sign the big ticket when he's 28.
Yeah, and I think you know if, if he's going to do what Jack did, he probably wouldn't go that route entirely. And but I mean, either way, I mean, the ball is in that regard is in his court. But the Devils are going to pay him, and he's going to deserve the money he gets because he's just that good. Something that I just happened upon that I want to mention: Juho Lamiko, his team, the ZSC Lions out of Switzerland, they just won the European equivalent of what is the Champions League in hockey. They won
Oh.
the Champions Hockey League. So best team in Europe from this past season could have something to do with his signing in New Jersey. I didn't even realize that.
Oh, winner. There
Yeah.
we go. We're
Yeah. I
signing
didn't I
winners
didn't even
now.
realize that this was the extent to which they have these tournaments in Europe. I mean, and coming from our soccer background, I feel like this is something I probably should have known about. And another fun name from the past, Swiss right winger Sven Andrighetto was the top
Mm.
scorer of the competition, playing on a line with Juho Lamiko, I believe. So that's some good news. That's some good news. We love to see that former NHLer Sven Andrighetto. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much just about. We're all caught up. I mean, are there any other looming free agents for the Devils that you want to touch on before we wrap for the day?
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident that a lot of the UFAs we're gonna move on from, and rightly so, because like just how they've kind of performed. Unfortunately, we
There's
love.
one that I would go to bat for, but keep going. Maybe two, but keep
It's
going.
just, like a Justin Dowling, Curtis Lazar, Daniel Sprong, Nate Bastian. I think if you're trying to shake up that bottom six, I think you got to let all of those guys go. Find different places for new homes for them, and just test something different heading into next year. The only person I'd look at potentially resigning is Brian Dumoulin, especially with um, Kovacevic going to probably, I would expect, to start the year on LTIR because, obviously he got knee surgery. It was like a non-contact injury for the most part. They didn't say what surgery it was, but you know me, I'm expecting the worst. I think he got ACL surgery. Um, and I think if it is ACL surgery, he's out until the playoffs. Or that's what I would do. I'd be like, take as long as you need to recover.
Potentially out to the
Use
playoffs.
that 4 million LTIR to build this team before they put a clause in the new CBA, which kind of fixes all that. But yeah, we're gonna have to see with Kovacevic. He won't be ready for training camp. That's already been confirmed. But I think he's gonna be out much longer than that.
Yeah,
So yeah, Brian Dumoulin, I would, if you can get a friendly contract, I would say, what was he making before? Let's see. Let me just check. I have it up right here. 315.
I
If
think
you
you
can,
have to get around the same.
if you're able to get like 275, three for 2 years, I'd probably consider doing that. But all the other free agents, I'd be like, we're gonna move on from all you guys. So I don't know, who did you want to go to bat for?
Obviously, Dumoulin was one that I was going to say. I mean, initially when he came in, I was like, we don't need another defenseman, and then every defenseman got injured, and I was like, Brian Dumoulin is the next Scott Stevens. So that's he shut me up. He was so good in the playoffs, man, and he's
Oh,
a
he
guy
was
that I would
so
not like
good.
to see have to go. But I mean, I'm looking around the rest of the defensemen. We're paying Dougie Hamilton 9, Brett Pesci 5.5, Brendan Dillon and Kovacevic are 4 apiece, Siegenthaler's 3.5. We're going to probably pay Luke Hughes in the realm of 7. And then
Nemec is going to need a
Nemec
contract.
is due next year. Casey is due in 2027. It just doesn't seem like there's room to pay Brian Dumoulin, excuse me, more than three.
Well,
You know,
before we log off, let's talk about this Dougie Hamilton because you obviously mentioned it as a potential like a candidate for trade. I think it would be difficult to try to trade his
I
contract
mean, he
at
runs the
least
social media.
yeah, I know, right? At least just this year. I think he would be like a big trade candidate next year.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think? Is that a realistic move that Tom Fitzgerald could pull off?
I don't know. I don't know what team would be a good suitor for him right now, if I'm being totally honest. Because you look around the league, there's not too many defensemen that are more expensive than him that you think like aren't worth that money. You know what I'm saying? Like with the exception of Darnell Nurse, there's not too many defensemen out there who are 9 million plus that really haven't earned it. It's a rare contract in this league, and for good reason. But Dougie Hamilton does have that value for the Devils. The problem is he's got to be on the ice. He's a
Yeah.
guy who deals with injury a lot. The upside to moving him is yes, you get the player that's not always as injured as Dougie Hamilton. So you fill in more room. The best ability is availability, but more like the $9 million that would free up, assuming they don't retain anything if they trade him, like that opens up endless possibilities for this team. Like
Yeah.
I don't want Dougie Hamilton to play for another team. I love him. I love his game. I don't think there are many players in the NHL who can do what he can do.
Yeah, his build is unique.
It's crazy unique for like he's not like a nimble skater, but he's a good skater at his size, and he's got a cannon of a shot. He's a fourth forward when he's out there, and he's not that big of a liability defensively, where it's like become a real detriment to his game.
Yeah.
Sometimes yes, mostly no. So this is not a player that I'm
He's
like.
our version of Bouchard.
This is not a player that I'm eager to get rid of. He's not quite a playmaker in the sense that Bouchard is, but he has the same role in terms of generating offense. And the one thing is the contract. And let's not forget he was the first domino to fall in this Devils era, right? Before
Yeah,
the
he picked
Hughes
us.
contract. I mean, he picked the Devils. He saw potential here and took them and took a pretty penny to get him over here, but that's what you got to do. He was the first domino to fall in what has now become a successful Devils team.
Yeah.
So you can't forget that. But that contract would open up a lot of money, and we're already spending a lot of money on defensemen.
Yeah.
And this is even before the Luke Hughes deal. So that's why I think about it. Is it likely that they move him? Probably not this year, like you mentioned, and it's a tough contract for any team to take on right now. Unless I don't know which team really needs this profile defenseman at the moment.
And what makes it a bit harder is he has a 10-team trade list. So it's not a 10-team no trade list where it's 22 teams that can trade from. He has a list that starts, I believe, July 1st of 10 teams that he would be open to get traded to. So who knows what teams those are going to be? I'm going to guess none of them are in Canada. That's usually how it works with a lot of guys. Just don't want to be traded to Canada, even though he's a Canadian guy. Um, but yeah, it's going to be interesting if that is a move that potentially pops up for Tom Fitzgerald. If Dougie Hamilton is willing to waive that no that clause, because it he loves being in New Jersey. I think that was one of the big reasons he signed here was it's not as big as New York City. He can be kind of an introvert per se in New Jersey. Not many people will recognize him. There's a lot of things that he likes to do that are around his area. So it's going to be interesting if he's willing to move away, just start new. I don't think so, and just not this year. I think that could be a conversation that they have next year. And I think he's going to be a big part of this team this year. I was looking at what Florida was doing on their power play in the playoffs. I'm thinking of going three forwards and two defensemen, like Luke Hughes as your kind of mobile defenseman that's playmaking at the top, and then you have a Dougie Hamilton like on that left circle taking one timers.
Mhm.
So
I mean, that sounds good. That
Yeah,
sounds
so
good.
like I feel like that would really open because with the only problem with Luke is that he just doesn't shoot enough on the power play. When you're like, come on, we just need you to get pucks on the net, pucks on the net. When Dougie Hamilton touches the puck on the power play, that sucker is getting on net. Or if you want to get in front of it, you're taking a 90-mile-per-hour slap shot off your knee, off your thigh, off your ankle. So. I'm interested to see what they do on that power play, and I think Dougie Hamilton is going to have a bounce back year if he's healthy. That's the big thing is if he's healthy. Um, but yeah, I think one more year of Dougie Hamilton on this team could be a real benefit for the Devils.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll mention about this blue line before we wrap up, and they've got a lot of guys locked down long term. There's a decent gap in age. I want to say you've got a lot of guys late 20s, early 30s between Dylan, Hamilton, Pesci. They're all 30 or over, and then Kovacevic and Siegenthaler are 27, 28. And then, and if you want to include Dumoulin, he's also 33, about Brendan Dillon's age. Then you've got three guys who are good enough to play at the NHL level who are all 21. Um, I think Brett Pesci is going to be here till he's 30. He's contracted till he's
He'll
35.
retire here.
Kovacevic is contracted till he's 33. Brendan Dillon's contracted till he's 36. Hamilton till he's 35. Siegenthaler, I'd have to move my camera so I could see what Siegenthaler how long he is locked up, but he's here till he's going to be in his early 30s at the bare minimum. I think 31.
He's got 1, 2, 3 more years.
3 years, right? Yeah. Okay. So I mean, he's got some time. These guys aren't going to be old, but I think there's something to address that, in 2 years' time, we're going to have a bunch of 23-year-olds and then a bunch of mid 30s. I
Oh,
think,
you're gonna have Salayev too, who's gonna be
and
20 next year.
so well, there you go. You got another youngster in there. You got, and I mean, like, there's a case to be made about some guys at the AHL level,
I
whether it's
personally think this
Glenn
is a
or.
really good mix. I think this is a good mix of guys that are veterans that have put
Mhm.
time in the NHL, and then you have that young blood of a Nemec or a Casey if he's still here. Ethan Edwards could push for a potential spot if there's injuries happening. Salayev next year is going to be a real interesting case to see
Mhm.
if they want him to develop one more year in the KHL, or they just bring him over instantly and try to kind of just put him in the fire per se. So I like this defensive core. I think a lot of pieces kind of fit each other, especially with Dougie Hamilton. I think he's going to be a third pair guy this year, and I feel like that's going to take the weight off of him, even though he's going to be making that money. The weight of being a number one defenseman won't be on his shoulders anymore. I think that's going to go to like a Brett Pesci we saw in the playoffs. Like he's a dog. He's that guy that you want in the playoffs. Him with Luke Hughes is going to be a real good pair, for the next coming years. So, Dougie Hamilton, I think he could still get to 50, 60 points, and I think that's fine for the player that he is. And
Well, look,
if he's playing average defense, that's a plus. So,
average
yeah.
defense is good.
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
look 50, 60 points at him. I would love to see that. Again, the only reason I'm floating the idea of him potentially moving is because that contract is just
Yeah.
a lot of money.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's just all about the time we have for Puck on the Parkway this week. For Daniel Reba and I've been James Burley. We're kicking off the off season
Hey,
with positive vibes, and
draft is a week from now.
the
So
draft is right around the corner. We've got some moves imminent before the start of July, of course, and then after July, when everything opens up, I think we're going to have some more to talk about. But yeah, once again, for Daniel Rebane, I've been James Burley. This has been Puck on the Parkway, and let's keep our eyes open for the rest of this offseason, shall we? It should be a
yes.
good one.